Hello and welcome to Managing in the Middle. I'm Rajita,
And I'm Vishal.
your host for this podcast. If you're here because you were intrigued by episode 0 or simply want to support us, thank you. And if you're joining us for the first time, here's what you should know. Managing in the Middle, we are on a mission to understand, cultivate, and protect the endangered art of people management. Why? Because we believe good people management isn't instinctual, it's cultivated.
In a recent post, we spoke about the evolution of people management, particularly the unprecedented rate at which the role has transformed in the past 5 years. At the cost of sounding overly self confident and maybe a little bit self indulgent, it's a must read. If you've managed anyone or been managed in the past 5 years, you know the job description has changed faster than a TikTok trend. Managers have gone from being part-time therapists during the pandemic, offering oodles of empathy and compassion, much like elephants, to the growth-obsessed bull of the post-COVID boom. Not surprisingly, the bull turned out to be a bull in a china shop and eventually gave way for the cautious stillness of the bear, bringing layoffs and tough conversations. And managers didn't even have the decision rights on who was going
Yeah,
to be laid off.
correct.
Cut to today, artificial intelligence has become a topic of much debate, and it's also getting a lot more integrated into the workplace. And somewhere there is this threat of obsolescence that is the subject of much popular discourse. The question for all of us as managers, and for organizations at large, are we entering the prehistoric or dinosaur era of managers? It's been a lot of change for just half a decade, but as Dr. Ian Malcolm from one of my favorite movies, Jurassic Park, said, life finds a way, and so will managers. While the nature of the work may change, the essential human connection remains. The core of people management, be it cultivating a sense of purpose, fostering collaboration, creating a psychologically safe environment, resolving conflict, or ensuring well being, are not tasks that can be easily replicated by AI just yet. So, with that belief, for this episode, we're diving into the constant evolution as well as expectations of the manager's role with a trip down memory lane. All right, Raji, how about you walk us through your people management journey? What were the different versions of yourself as a manager and what triggered each transformation?
You know, Vishal, when you said trip down memory lane, my mind raced back to maybe about 20, 25 years since I started working in the corporate world and the kind of manager that I had. But like you rightly pointed out, in the last 5 years, life has been very different. And I think there was a lot that I did learn as a manager when I was in the early part of my career as a people manager. But I think the last 5 years completely accelerated my learning, and they were a catalyst of a different kind, literally. When I first joined the workforce, I got incredibly lucky with my manager. This was a person, who gave everything you'd want in a mentor. Like they were everything that a mentor could be. And they taught me how to navigate corporate life. They gave me regular feedback on the kind of work I was doing. They walked me through all those tricky situations you encounter at a workplace. They were super nurturing. And this was my first experience of working in the corporate world since I came from being a doctor. And it completely changed my I mean it completely changed my perspective of what corporate life is like. Or I wouldn't even say it was a great entryway into the corporate life, because this was my first time. And um, even when I had some personal stuff going on for me, my manager was there, not only as a mentor in professional life, but also in personal life. So naturally, when I became a manager myself, I thought, this is it. This is what good management looks like, and I want to be that same protective, nurturing figure for my team. I was basically trying to be a work parent, like a mother hen, literally, and nothing was going to hurt my people on my watch. And at first, it was really great. Like everyone was happy, my team was happy. I was very happy because I felt like, like I had a purpose in life, and things were going really smooth. But then what happened was that when the time came to give some really tough feedback, I just fell apart. I'm a chronic people pleaser. I'm on my way to recovery, I'm thinking. But the thought of disappointing someone or just having them dislike me because I'm giving them tough feedback, it was killing me. So what did I do? I completely overcorrected. I went to the other side. I went from being this warm, nurturing manager to basically being ice cold and abrasive when delivering feedback. I remember the visceral feeling of having to give someone feedback and having my throat clamp up, my tongue going dry. It was crazy. And my poor team, they had no idea what hit them. One day I was their buddy, having great fun, and the other day I became this really harsh critic. And the light bulb moment came to me when I finally stopped making it about me. And I feel that was the point of inflection or change in me. And I said that instead of, oh God, they're going to hate me for this feedback, I started thinking, how is this actually going to help them grow? And that was a game changer. Suddenly, my team could feel that the feedback was coming from a place of wanting to help them and not from a place of wanting to destroy them and not from a place of my own discomfort, right? Like I was able to balance both those roles of being there for them as a friend and support and give tough feedback at the same time.
Raji, you don't
Yeah.
know what I would give to be a fly on the wall because people pleaser and abrasive are two terms I would never associate with you.
Seriously, Vishal. Yeah, I wouldn't associate myself with them as well, but and that's what it is. I think, when you reflect and you see yourself, you're like, am I that person? Do I want to be that person? And I think sometimes you don't get everything from one manager, right? Like, like I had the super supportive manager. That was my example of a good manager. But later on, when I became a manager, I realized there are tough times as well. How do you deal with that? Like, no, not everything is always hunky dory and rosy. So, yeah, like, but when I look back, I think, life just kept teaching me more and more lessons like that. Like, even after that breakthrough, I was still stuck in this, I still exist to serve my team mindset. And that again was put to test when the pandemic hit. Everything got chaotic. I was watching my team struggle. I was also trying to shield them from all that was happening, the uncertainty that was taking place around us. And I felt like I was failing them by not being able to protect them from everything around us. And all the while, you're also dealing, I mean, you've been through the pandemic as well with us, right, as a manager. You're dealing with your own set of troubles, and you're also having to be there for your team. And that's where, when we talk of being a therapist, I think that's where that was the prime role that was expected of a manager as well. But obviously, it's not sustainable. And at one point, I thought to myself, wait, is my job really to protect them from the reality? Maybe it's actually to help them see what's actually happening around us, put it into context for them and their role, and then help them navigate it and be with them, like, we're in this together kind of thing. And honestly, that meant putting the data and insights first, even if when it meant that it was not what people wanted to hear, to show them the reality, to hold up the mirror and say, okay, this is what is actually happening around us. And to me, it meant as a manager to to learn that a good manager means leading with business reality first and people's feelings second. Of course, it didn't mean to be like cruel or cold or anything, but how do you put things in perspective so that there is a balance? And how do you bring your team on board with that balance and the decisions that you're making, right? Now, not that I stopped caring about my team, but I realized that sugarcoating market conditions or company challenges was not serving them well at all. And they needed the real information of what is happening around them to make good decisions about their own careers, their work, what they were going to do. So I think that to me was another eye opening moment, if I can call it that.
I know. No, the history will never look kindly on the pandemic, but my personal take on it, if we would apply a very different lens, I think some of the best managers were forged during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was like trial by fire, literally. You
No,
and
100%.
there was no support. There was nothing. You just had to look around, think on your feet, learn. And like I said at the start, I think all that we learned was completely accelerated and at super high speeds during the pandemic. So, but
No,
I do want to call out one piece of knowledge or information that came across. I was uh, shaping my role or understanding as a like what is my role as a people manager, and I call it the cornerstone of my journey, and it was discovering the Jim Collins's concept of level 5 leadership. If some of you have not read the book Good to Great, I would 100% recommend it because it just completely clicked with my values. And the idea was that of being a humble but determined person, of putting organization success ahead of your own ego, and putting your team's success ahead of your own success. And I really embraced that approach. I became a manager who was always supporting my team behind the scenes, taking the brickbats for them, but always giving them the bouquets. And it helped me to build stronger teams. It helped me to delegate more effectively. It helped me to genuinely empower people to succeed. And here's the thing, when I thought that this was a great principle that I've learned and I want to adhere to it, my team started giving me feedback again that they wanted to see me being more visible, leading big projects, because they felt that if I was leading those big projects, it would get the team the kind of visibility that they needed. And honestly, they wanted me to step up in a much bigger way. Um, it did go against a bit of my personal grain and values, but it was very, very interesting to see that tension between my natural level 5 inclination to stay in the background and their need for me to be more of a visible leader for their sakes. And again, I know the pandemic is the most recent one, but it it was a situation that we had never experienced before. And
Mhm.
because it was Asia was one of the first regions to face the impact of the
Yep.
pandemic, my team and I were front and center. We were leading through crisis mode, and it gave me the perfect opportunity to step into that more visible role that they had been asking for. And it also helped me to stay true to my level 5 principles. So I feel that, again, I realized where the need was coming from and I took the opportunity. So an evolution of sorts, despite it not matching my own nature, if I can call it that. But if I was to just look back, right, what really strikes me about being a manager means um, what sorry what strikes me about being a manager who evolves constantly is that you're constantly juggling different stakeholders. So you also need to
Mhm.
remember that your team is an important stakeholder, and because they are a stakeholder, you also need to match their needs, right? So the thing is that each of them has different needs at different times, and the only way you can survive as a people manager in this constantly changing landscape is to be keenly aware of what each stakeholder needs and then flex it to meet the need of the hour. So, to quote another real scientist, Darwin, I'll say it's not the strongest that survive, but it's the most adaptable ones that survive. And in management, I don't think it could be more true. So, that's my
Yeah.
journey. Well, I'd love to hear about your own evolution as well.
No, absolutely happy to kind of jump into it. But the one thing I must say is you probably had multiple moments where you thought you had figured it out, and then your team came with a set of new expectations, or different teams had different expectations. And I think somewhere it kind of just goes to this role where it feels so rewarding at times, and it's at the same point, it's so thankless in so many ways. And you feel like you've got this figured. And it's just another moment to remind you that it's going to be a lifelong journey of learning.
Yeah, and I think, somewhere you also realize that you haven't arrived just because you've become a manager, and you have to learn to respond rather than react to what is happening around you. And to respond, you have to listen. There's no way out. Yeah, yeah. But tell us more
Talking
about
about
your journey. Tell us more.
Talking about arrived as a manager, I think that's where my journey kind of starts. So if I was to look at the arc of my people management journey, I'm
Yeah.
probably one of those few people that didn't learn anything in the pandemic. The pandemic did not fundamentally alter the way I managed. It's a shame. There might have been a missed opportunity over there. But if I was to kind of draw parallels between my people management journey and the movies, considering I am such a huge fan of them,
Yes.
I think somewhere there are parallels with Kung Fu Panda. So for me, when I started my people management journey, I call it chapter one. A hero was born. And going back to what you said, I actually thought I had arrived in life.
Yeah.
Becoming a people manager was never really part of my plan. The full and not so very long story is in episode zero of our podcast. Shameless plug again for anyone who's listening in today, in case you haven't
Yes.
already watched it.
Yes, please.
But what it kind of brought for me was this whole notion that there is so much prestige and power associated with this role that it was going to be an amazing opportunity to flex everything that I had learned and knew. And not in a bad way. I was managing a relatively junior team at that stage of my career, and while I wasn't a narcissist then or now, thank God for that, I did enjoy being a little bit of a suffering know-it-all, showing off my experience. And this is a couple of years of experience, so not a whole lot to go off,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's fun, guiding the team on how exactly, they need to kind of be doing their work, learning the ropes, showing them how to do that, and also somewhere kind of giving a little bit into my own quest for perfection. And a lot of that was grounded in subject matter expertise or domain, right? Because that was largely the skills that I had developed as, I transitioned from an IC to a manager. And my team didn't necessarily suffer as a result of this because thank God for always being people first and giving them opportunity as well as credit where credit was due. But I think this phase was inherently more about me than the team.
Mm.
And I was happy to share the spotlight while ensuring I was the main act. So it was an interesting starting point to the idea of people management.
Mm. And
Uh, cut
then?
to chapter two.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'm
you were
so
saying something?
curious. I mean, you're showing the hero's journey kind of thing, right? I'm very
Yeah.
curious. And then what
Yeah.
happened?
Cut to chapter two, which is taming of the shrew or taming of the hero, whichever way you want to kind of put it. I think my biggest challenge in people management was when I landed up inheriting my peer group as part of an org change.
Mm.
And that's what forged, I guess, those people management skills, if you were to say so. And everything that I knew to be true basically got tossed out in a single go.
Right.
This was a group of really highly intelligent people, extremely seasoned and experienced. A lot of them were subject matter experts in areas that
Mm.
I had no prior experience in. And
Hmm.
so I couldn't necessarily lead with just knowledge and information, which is what I had kind of done in the past. Absolutely bombed this role initially, but I think it also led to exponential growth over time and a shift in my own beliefs on what is the role as well as expectation of a
Yeah.
manager.
Yeah.
Again, to kind of play to the movie parlance, I think somewhere I learned to be more of a producer who's kind of orchestrating things across a broader gamut than, let's say being the main actor.
Right.
And started looking at the team as a collective of their individual strengths,
Mm.
figuring out how can I kind of play to these strengths. And I
Right.
think more importantly, grew to appreciate the idea that the team's success is my success, their achievements is my achievement. And somewhere along that way, I think the inner hero was kind of tempered a little bit. And since then, I've kind of leaned into this idea that I don't want to be the hero, but I could potentially spin up or help, you know, make a few heroes in the corporate
Yeah.
world in whatever form or shape.
Not the
And
king,
going
but the
back to
kingmaker.
yeah, it could be the kingmaker. And I think going back to my Kung Fu Panda start, I think I'm finally getting towards the idea of inner peace for those who watch the movie and get
Oh,
it.
wow. That's a very nice, that's a nice hero. And I just wanted to say, Vishal, at the start you said that, the pandemic didn't really teach me much, but I have a feeling it's because, I mean, just listening to what you said, you already had what it required to deal with the pandemic. So it
Indeed.
wasn't as jarring for you then. So
Yeah.
kudos to you on that. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't know what I did in the pandemic because somewhere I think my focus was more around trying to raise a child that had just been born in the
Yeah,
family.
yeah, yeah.
And we also kind of got caught between India and Singapore trying to just make our way to India and back through a
True.
pregnancy and delivery. So I really don't know what value I brought to my team during the pandemic, but hey, I'll leave that to them to kind of comment on.
Yes.
Last, last but not the least, if I was to kind of look at chapter three, I think, and it obviously has been my focus
Yeah.
ever since this realization of, it being all about the team kind of emerged is, how do I kind of meet my team where they are,
Mm.
um, and find ways to kind of amplify their growth and their achievements. Uh, an idea that I heard very early on, but it took years for me to kind of make peace with was this notion that a successful team should be able to thrive without their manager, almost self-managed to a certain
Yeah,
sense. Of course, that would require a system that kind of nurtures and fosters it, and it also requires heightened level of psychological safety and security between the individual team members.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
it's kind of been one of my stretch goals, I think, ever since. Um, how can I kind of pivot and shift to meet their needs, which allow them to kind of thrive not just within the organization but externally as well, if that's kind
Yeah.
of where they want to
Yeah.
go. And it's also important, I think, to just keep it healthy, keep it real, whatever the state of union may be, and most important, not necessarily spread myself too thin because I
Mm.
think to one of the points you kind of raised earlier, where you said, you would basically do anything to kind of meet the needs of your team. If we were to kind of just apply, I guess, the servant leadership model to this, you can land up taking a really, really extreme path and attempt to overcome every constraint. But somewhere I remind myself that even though I now aspire to be a hero maker, I can't always ensure the success of every hero.
Also, you can't be a superhero, right? Because it's very emotionally draining, and I think we don't pay much attention to what it
Yeah.
takes from us to be that person. So, absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think somewhere also it's very typical of most corporate environments, but we love to worship heroes, right? So heroics has a whole different playbook, and
Yeah,
it's probably what most organizations have thrived on for as long as they have existed. So
correct.
how can we how can we not like a hero?
Or can we not? But you don't have to be an anti-hero to not be a hero. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Well, speaking of anti-heroes and heroes, I mean,
Yes.
we obviously spent the last couple of minutes just chatting through our own individual journeys. And I think for the both of us, Raji, we kind of went into people management potentially with some expectations. A few things panned out as intended along the way, some didn't. But I'm curious, what's your most counterintuitive thing you've learned about people management? Something that goes completely against conventional wisdom.
Oh, that's that's a big one. Um, I think you know how everyone thinks a manager is supposed to be this all-knowing guru who has mastered every aspect of your team's work.
Yeah.
And you know, that is what actually brought us to become a manager sometimes. That
Yeah.
so sometimes you become the manager because you're the best at something and or you have all the knowledge. You're a high-performing individual contributor. And people expect that the manager is supposed to be the person with all the answers, one who can guide everyone through anything. And that's a part of hero worship as well, I think, or an expectation from a hero, right? In fact, I think even Project Oxygen refers to this as one of the attributes of a good manager, having work related knowledge or just being an expert. And I used to think that
Mhm.
that's an important aspect. But over time, I realized that it's a total myth. If not a total myth, it's definitely a partial myth, right? Like it's very counterintuitive, I know. And I say that because I learned this the hard way when I was really digging into what makes my team work. Uh,
Yeah.
I take pride in saying that I have built strong teams, and I started looking at, okay, what made my team really work? Is it team dynamics? Is it me as an expert? What is going on here? And yes, team dynamics are important. How people get along in a team matters. How they work together really it really matters. But what really jumped out to me was this pattern, that my most successful teams weren't the ones where I knew everything. It was those teams where the team members were the ones who had different strengths, that they all fit together like a fantastic puzzle, getting together, like all the pieces of the puzzle fitting really well together. And that is what got us the best results. And that's when it really hit me. It hit me that instead of me trying to be an expert at everything, what if I just got really intentional about hiring people who were strong where, say, I was weak? And why me, right? Like, I'm not the central point of the team at all. What if we got a team together where everyone had complementary skills? And here's the thing with that kind of an approach, right? It meant that I had to do some real soul searching. I had to honestly look at myself and say, okay, what am I actually good at? What am I terrible at? And admit that. And then I had to figure out what skills we needed, not just today to lead, for to work as a team, but what did we
Yeah.
need down the road in the future? And this was the most, it was very intensive. Like, it's not easy to think of today, think of later, the future, and think of what strengths we have. But what it took from me as a people manager was to really understand each member's strengths and blind spots. It was not just about their strengths or skills or knowledge. I also had to understand what actually motivated each person, what were their dreams, what did they want to learn, where did they see themselves going in the next few years. And that meant me as a manager taking real time to get to know them as individuals and not just as job descriptions. And the real game changer of this approach was when I started having honest conversations with my team. And I would tell them, like, hey, I don't have a clue about this, but you are the experts here. You need to take lead. And then something really cool started happening. Uh, I started practicing what I call the Hollywood way, going ahead with your, movie analogy here. But honestly, apparently it's called the Hollywood way. I tried to look it up, and I think there are some articles on that. But the concept is that, how in Hollywood, when they're making a movie, what they do is they bring the best people for that film together. The best director, best cinematographer, best actors, based on what is required for that movie. And then once the movie is done, they all go and work on different films. So that's
Mm.
exactly the approach I started taking with my team. So whenever we had a project that came up, I would not just blindly assign it to whoever was either available or whose purview it fell under. And I said, okay, who has the skills for this? Who's been wanting to learn about this area? Who is this going to help in building their career goals? Right?
Mm.
And keeping those thoughts in mind, I started bringing the project team together, and we got some fantastic results, and everyone grew because of that. The team had some fantastic results. So I realized that, while the question was the counterintuitive knowledge piece, where I said, I don't need to know everything. I think it also talks about how you don't need to stick to prescribed roles in a team when you have to get work done. There's a lot of dynamics that come into play when people are motivated to do some work and deliver. And as a manager, I realized that you need to understand what those dynamics are. And every time we've had a project and the project wrapped up, my team would disperse and we'd form new combinations for the next thing. And suddenly, we were no longer the static hierarchy with me as their manager, they doing only fixed roles. We became a group of people leading our team together. Each person was stepping up where they were strongest and growing in the directions that they wanted to go. So that way, we became more powerful as a group than just me trying to be the know it all manager. And I felt that that to me was totally counterintuitive to what I've heard about what a manager needs to be.
I love this. I love this story as well as this concept of the Hollywood way. I mean, it's a term that I haven't necessarily come across. And I think somewhere in your example, Raji, it talks to how much vulnerability you need to kind of have as a manager to be able to say you don't have the answers. And it might
Yeah.
seem like the most simplest thing, but it's probably still very, very hard for a lot of people to do. And I mean, also this idea of leveraging, you know, what each team member brings to the table in a way that's, I guess, conducive to collective good. It kind of sounds really, really, amazing. On a lighter note, I don't think you're inspiring a whole lot of confidence for our Indian film industry or Bollywood with this approach, because nepotism rocks, right?
I agree. I agree, Vishal. I think they should hear about the Hollywood way and make
They
better,
should.
successful films. Yeah. Okay, tell me more. Before I go on my Hollywood, Bollywood rant, tell me about your counterintuitive aha moment.
So I think, I've had a few over the years, and like I didn't exactly go in with any expectations of people managing a certain way. So
Mm.
luckily for me, there was no playbook, but some fun ones that I've kind of encountered over the years, which I just kind of roll my eyes at is, one particularly is this, playbook to manage different generations, or the idea
Mm.
that there is one. So you hear things like, boomers are resistant to change and they don't get technology. Gen Z is apparently cynical, skeptical, and independent. I mean, clearly they had a great time in the 80s with like the hippie culture or whatever it is. Millennials, which is my generation, are entitled job hoppers. You're talking to someone who spent 18 years in a single organization, absolutely, and in constant need of praise and overtly dependent on technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I like some praise, but technology is questionable. And
Yeah.
then, of course, with Gen Z, we're talking about instant gratification and they prioritize work-life balance to the point of being lazy. The reality, though, I mean, it just talks to human nature of loving to put people in a box. And that's probably the path to least resistance to make of any situation.
Yeah.
But you know me. We've spent considerable years as friends and also working together. And I think you'd probably agree with me as well that I exude more boomer energy than most boomers out there.
100%.
So my question really is, when you think about generational differences, is it really about individual preferences and how effectively you can communicate with people on your team?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not fully discounting, the generational playbooks. I completely understand the fact that there might be some value, although I'm still trying to see it, to make sense of these larger groups, but not endorsing the application either, because it does feel a little cookie cutter, especially when it comes to a small group of people that most managers manage, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily apply it even if I was leading an organization of like several hundred, because how do you group people? Uh, but I think what it kind of drives home for me is this idea that people management was meant to be the art and science of understanding the humans you're managing or you're responsible for in whatever
Hmm.
way you consider this responsibility. So the least you can do is to get to know them on an individual level, as well as in the context of the environment that they're operating in. That's not a very tall order to ask for someone who has been handed this
Absolutely.
responsibility, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes, a lot of people make the mistake of boxing themselves in a manager role and expectations from a manager, which is
Right.
why, you know,
Yeah,
then they try to use uh, heuristics to approach intergenerational workplaces. So, absolutely.
100%. No, and
Absolutely.
you're right, right? Like there isn't an archetype of a perfect manager. I mean,
Yeah.
it's how you manage across different situations, which makes you a good manager, I mean, or a perfect manager, whichever way you want to kind of look at it.
Yeah.
Uh, but the other myth, which I
Mhm.
think was probably a lot more rampant when I started off my career, I haven't heard a lot of chatter about it lately, but it used to be a thing back in like, I guess, the early 2000s and the late 2000s, maybe, was this whole idea that managers and leaders need to be charismatic.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with charisma. I love some too on occasion. I mean, what would we all do without a little bit of Shah Rukh Khan?
True.
But I think the notion that without charisma, you can't inspire or motivate your team, uh, and it's integral to success that the best leaders are always charismatic and extroverted is slightly hogwash. If I was to kind of stay on the same movie theme, if everyone was Shah Rukh Khan, then what would kind of happen to the Ajay Devgans and Akshay Kumars of the world? For those
Yes,
who get the Bollywood reference.
totally, totally. Not
So I
everything
always,
is wrong with the Bollywood, no?
no, not everything is wrong with Bollywood. Yeah, hey, we have a little Shah Rukh Khan, why not?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
But obviously, I think I associate myself a little more with the camp of Ajay Devgan and Akshay Kumar because, I mean, I am a quiet leader. And over the years, I think I have found so much benefit being brought to organizations through strong listening skills. And I somewhere feel like quiet leadership lends itself better to understanding of your teams, to fostering trust with them. And it's also kind of helped me become a lot more calm and thoughtful,
Mm,
particularly in situations.
yeah.
Uh, the empathy and appreciation for my teams is always kind of dialed up
Mm,
as a result of not prioritizing myself or not necessarily having to kind of, you know, I guess, present a certain persona,
mm,
which I know a lot of charismatic leaders may naturally carry, but I'd like to believe there is some level of, you know, effort in that as well. Uh, and while I may be a quiet leader, I think I also don't forget to have fun. So that's really, really important. And I think it's also integral to quiet leadership. I mean, you establish, you know, an environment with your teams where you encourage proactive behaviors, and sometimes they shape up to be very provocative as well. I'm talking to people on my last team, they know who they are. But the last team that I managed at Google, we had a really fun way of communicating with each other, not using words, only memes. And we could have an entire dialogue or a discourse with just memes. And so I'm
Amazing.
like, it fosters something different in your teams. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I'm hearing you also say is that being a quiet leader does not mean being a serious leader, right? Like
No,
it, yeah, you can
spot
still
on.
have fun. It doesn't, but and it, you know, I think charisma is overrated. It's no longer are the days of like a chest thumping leader shouting off the
Exactly.
rooftop or something like that. So yeah.
100%. And, while we're staying on the subject of fun, let's
Mm.
maybe, you know, take one more question that's not as serious because I feel like we have dispensed all the knowledge that you and I collectively have for this episode already. And after this very intellectual, stimulating conversation,
Yeah.
let's kind of go down a little bit.
Okay.
So, considering most of our chatter today is about bringing people management and technology together, if you had the opportunity, uh, you know, to make your manager an app on your phone, which eventually might happen considering the direction AI is going in,
I know.
what's one evergreen feature you'd probably add to make your life easier? And what bug would you want them to immediately fix?
Ooh, my manager is an app. Can you imagine? Gosh, with AI coming up, we may end up having managers who are actually apps. And so this is a good, a good bit of information for anybody who's making manager AI there.
No,
Um,
100,
but that's such a
100%. I
great
mean,
question, right? It's
network.
such a great question. How do you humanize that app? Um, I think I'll go with what I think I would really want in an app or
Mhm.
my manager, right? And I think I like the app analogy a lot. So I'm going to say that I would love to have a safe mode option on my app. You know how when your computer goes into safe mode, it creates this protected environment where you can work through issues without causing any crashing. And I think that's what I need from my manager. And I remember in the last decade of my career, when I always was very open with my managers that I like to vent. Don't judge me for that. And I think that's what I need from my manager. A judgment-free zone where I can vent, I can think out loud, I can work through problems you know, without them immediately jumping into a fix-it mode or them trying to debug my emotions, but they're just there to listen, right? So just let me run my processes in this safe space while they observe, and then maybe they can ask me a question or two as a coach would ask, right? And so that is definitely something I would love in my manager app. Um,
Raji,
yes.
you want a safe mode in your manager app. I think with this ask, most managers are going to want an incognito mode to run away from their teams.
Can you imagine, Vishal? I don't exist. That is the dream of a self-managed teams or like
That is
a
the dream of the
holacracy, right?
self-managed
Like
team.
incognito. We are there, but we are not
100%.
there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, the bug, I think, for me, I'm going to call this bug the information opacity bug, okay? And it's a bug where, when an app crashes,
Yeah.
it just gives you some generic error message instead of telling you what is actually wrong. For me, that's what it's like when managers hoard or block information.
Mhm.
It's so important for a manager to trickle information down from their managers to their teams because
Yeah.
I feel that it really helps me understand what to, where to work, what troubleshooting to do, what decisions to make. I need a full error log. So if
Yeah.
I want my manager to tell me what's happening behind the scenes, I want the real constraints, what decisions are being made upstream. Of course, with the limitations of confidentiality, what I can't or should not know, don't tell me. But at least tell me what really matters to me. And I think a lot of managers sometimes tend to withhold information because they don't know how to discern, or they are worried that if I tell my what might happen. But I would like managers to take a little bit more. Uh, I would like my manager to be more trusting of me and share information with me, especially if it is going to impact the environment I'm operating within.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I
Those
think
are
my
my bug.
bug.
Yeah. What is your? Oh, you're starting with a bug.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm starting with the bug because it's a nice extension of the information opacity bug that we just kind of
Okay.
covered. I'm calling mine the bad news buffer bug. So
Hmm.
as much as I want access to information like you and for managers to kind of contextualize it, I think it's also important to kind of keep it real and unfiltered. So
Right.
whether it's what state of the organization is, whether it's feedback, I feel like even the most senior leaders, they try to buffer their messages. And
Hmm.
then what it kind of comes across is that jarring feeling when something is being buffered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it also kind of makes me feel sometimes that at 40, I'm not being treated like an adult. So my note to managers who try to buffer is basically that compassionate candor is totally acceptable. It doesn't need to be radical. It can be transparent with a lot of empathy and
Yeah.
intention. And somewhere, I think it's kind of, you know, it's integral to also the way in which I think modern day parents manage their kids today. So if managers want to be a parent, and if that's, I guess, their line of thinking about the role, I'm saying do it with compassion, do it with transparency, and a healthy dose of reality.
Absolutely. No point shielding, like we said, right? And uh, I was just thinking when you said feedback, even feedback on performance. Like if I don't know what I'm doing wrong, don't tell me 1 year later in my reviews, right? Tell me now when I have a chance to fix it. Yeah.
Why do you think we moved to an annual review cycle, Raji?
From quarterly.
From quarterly.
To avoid these
It's
conversations, is that what you think? No, no, no,
exactly to avoid these conversations and give feedback
no.
once a year.
No,
And even then, some managers are not able to give feedback, huh?
no, I think I mean, definitely we'll talk at some point about, the cognitive load on managers with these tasks and how they can manage their energy. But it, I don't think feedback should be tied to an annual review. And I'm sorry, to going a little deeper into that, but it should come every time. And I think that is where compassion comes in, right? Like I love the word compassionate candor. It comes in then, it comes in when it really matters. So, yeah. And what about a feature request that you're making?
So my feature request going from always on feedback is this idea of always being in sync with your manager.
Hmm.
And I think, it's again like, you have apps where it automatically syncs as
Yeah,
opposed to you having to kind of scroll the page down or the app down for it to sync. And I think the point is people management is always meant to be personalized. and it needs to be tailored to whatever the evolving needs of your direct reports are. It doesn't mean that you need to meet every need. And also for me, I don't have the expectation that my manager needs to meet my every need. But what I would have a problem with is if it's fundamentally misaligned in terms of direction, right? So, at least take care of the 80%, and the 20% is something we can work through and figure out together. But it ideally shouldn't be the other way, thinking about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very, yeah, interesting. And definitely in line with what we've been discussing so far, right? So, yeah.
absolutely. Okay, now that we've got these manager apps in production, let's go back to where we started.
Yeah.
And so this episode obviously set out to make sense of the evolution of the manager's role, as well as some expectations through our journeys. And so as we bring it to a close, it's only fair we recap some takeaways for whoever's listening to us out there. I think we had a lot of banter in this conversation. So just in case people zoned out or our key messages got lost, Raji, what are your top three takeaways from this collective banter?
Vishal, for me, I think the first one is what you referenced, I think, in the context of um, not being a hero, but being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know. And that is
Mhm,
the sense of security. I think it's a hygiene factor for managers. Without it, neither the manager nor their team will survive, let alone thrive, right? And to me, security is when a sense of security is when you are not stealing from your team's successes, you're not taking credit for what someone else is doing, and you're actually secure with the knowledge that you and your team can both thrive together. It does not have to be
mhm,
either or, right? So for me, that is number one. And I think in any role that you play, like it's a hygiene factor, right? The second is the approach that will help you become more secure is to say it's okay to not have all the answers. I think
mhm,
if if managers can be more strategic about how they hire and then build teams rather than just thinking of just individuals in a team, I think it'll really work well. So you hire people that are smarter than you to solve the problems. You don't need to be the savior, and
mhm.
you don't have to be the hero and or the expert that they that has to have all the answers. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off you.
It
So
does.
if you let people know that you don't have all the answers, but you have the skills to help your people figure it out collectively, that you're open to learning from your team, I think it just makes it much easier on a manager. And the last one for me, like a takeaway, is that there's not one size that fits all. Every team goes through phases. There are different seasons, different situations, and every one of those situations and seasons warrants a different hat, and you can try every one of them. You have to be a different manager, and you have to adapt to the times that you're living in. So like your wardrobe, you may gravitate often to a few hats, but you have to make sure that you're matching them to what the season demands. So I'm not a clothes horse, but it's a great. I think that makes for a great analogy. What about you?
No, it definitely does. I mean, like I love the recap because it clearly, sums up everything that I've been thinking of coming out of this conversation. And, I also love the fact that we're saying, hey, go try on a few different hats, maybe make a few manager faux pas. And no one ever learned by having their fashion sense or fashion game spot on every time. So
Yeah,
why should we have that expectation from managers as well, right? Like make a few mistakes and you will grow through those mistakes and you will learn. And yeah, that's what it's all about.
totally, totally. So
All right.
yeah, we're almost
So
at the end of this. What can we tell our listeners to expect next time, Vishal?
all right. So obviously, this conversation around the evolving role of managers is just getting started.
That's right.
I think if I kind of also reflect on everything that we've touched upon today, I can think of 10 or maybe even more podcast episode ideas.
Exactly.
But for our next episode, we've decided to kind of take inspiration from what we just shared earlier and try on a different hat, and welcome a friend to amp up the conversation if this is not already amped up, with more perspectives, a lot more insight, and oodles and oodles of banter. So stay tuned. Uh, we'll probably put out a public service announcement at some point in the coming weeks on who the person is that's joining us, as well as the topic that we are going to tackle. But that's all for this episode. Until next time, fight the good fight and keep managing in the middle.
Thank you.
Thank you.